So everyone has this pulled up? This is the project I sent you. You got it? This builds and runs. It shouldn't do anything, but it should build and run. What? Land school crash. This time? We good? All right, so if all this is up, let's go to the project and let's add a class. I'm just going to call it state. Put the virtual destructor in there. This is going to be our base class. This is where everything happens, or the I guess the overseer of all the other states. We know we're going to need a few things like our virtual functions. So virtual void enter, virtual void update, virtual void exit. And these are pure virtual, so we can just go ahead and set these to 0. I should have done that. This is our abstract class, our base class. And we'll get our state pointers here. For our current state, our menu, options, what else was I doing?
Credits.
Credits? Oh, we'll put credits in there. Credits. I'm not going to do them all. I'll leave 2 for you to figure out, but that will get us up and rolling here. We'll also make our derived classes. So we'll have menu, we'll get one of these set up and copy and paste it, and then it won't take as long that way. Remember, in your header file, you're just declaring these functions. Not actually defining them. I don't know why I put that there. We define them over in the source. We probably need to pass delta around. So let's put some floats in here. So whether or not enter needs delta, I don't know. We'll assume it doesn't. We may regret that assumption later, but no, that's wrong. Why did I do that? We don't need that there. What else do we need in here? Think about it. You got a screen. It's the main menu. What do you need for this to function? What? Okay. We might need a display function. I don't know what you said.
No, I was thinking of an actual menu where you would have to trade the switch to trade the menu.
Oh, like a button? Yeah, we'll need some buttons. That's a good one. We'll need a mouse if we're going to click the buttons, right? So that's some stuff that will need to come in here at some point. But let's go ahead and... Do we want a display function? It's hard to foresee the future, so we may end up coming back and modifying this a lot, but you're probably right. We may want just a display function up here in state that will do our clear and present. I don't know, we'll see. We'll play it by ear. Let's copy this thing and paste it out a few times and change the name. We're going to have menu, we're going to have options, and we're going to have credits. Oh, we also need our constructor and our destructor. I don't know why I did that. Credits. Credits. And we can save a little bit of time by defining our destructor right here. Probably not a lot going on there, so we'll trade the semicolon for a pair of braces, and if we do need to write some code in there, we'll come back and do that. But I think for right now we can get away with just doing it like that. All right, we'll step over to the source file. We've got our state stuff. We can also set up our menu stuff here. We know menu has a constructor. It has a inner function. Has an update. And it has a exit. We don't have the destructor because we defined it over in the header. So copy these guys. We'll paste those twice, and we'll change menu to options. I do Control-Shift-H and then I change menu for options. Do you replace? Does this work? Well, that was pretty easy. And then we do credits.
Let's do that again.
Control-Shift-H. That's worth knowing how to do. In this, it was kind of trivial. It saved me a little bit of time, but in a large project, if you want to change a whole lot of stuff, Control-Shift-H is pretty handy.
Ooh.
So, let's get started with the menu. We know we want to start in the menu. I've got to get my window and my renderer over to my state files because all of them are going to need that stuff. Sorry, that's not a state pointer, that's a SDL pointer. We'll need to include SDL over here. Probably want IO stream. And we may want to come back and get string later. I'll hold off on the namespace for now. We need a renderer and a window. We only want one of these, so we'll make it static. And whenever you make a static variable inside a class, remember you have to define that outside the class, normally in the source file. So we'll just come up here at the after state, and we'll put in the data type. It was the SDL window pointer. We put in the scope. The variable name, and we set it equal to 0. And do the same thing for the renderer. And then up here in our state constructor, we want to initialize these guys. Does that mean I want to take them out of main? Because if I'm going to initialize them in state, I don't need them here. Let's just copy that, move that over. Or cut it. And we'll put an if statement there that says if there's no window, let's make one. So let's review what we just did. We said we need a window and a renderer in every state. That way it goes, or for that reason it goes in the base class. We only need one for all of the states, so we make them static, and every subclass will share them. if you make a static class variable, you have to define that thing outside in global space. So we did that here. But they can't be set to 0. It doesn't function that way. We have to call these functions create window, create renderer. And so in the base class constructor, I put an if statement there. If there's no window, if this is 0, which I put it down here, it will create the window, create the renderer. And then the next time around when it creates the other states, we don't have to worry about this running. In theory, if I've done all that correctly. All right, we should have a window and a renderer for every state. Let's see if we can get what else do we need? We need an event. I don't know if, yeah, we'll put it here. We'll make an SDL event. And is that it? Maybe. We said we need a mouse and we need some buttons. And we know that every state is going to have a background image, right? Let's do that. SDL texture. I don't like using long variable names like that, but sometimes it's easier to follow if I do. So for the sake of class, I'm going to leave it long because I want you to know that's what this pointer is for. Let's see if we can get an image to show up and at least get the menu going, and we'll go on from there. Let's go to our state CPP file. Here in the constructor, when we create the menu, we're going to want to change that background texture. If you remember, this is img_load texture. And here's where you drop in your images. So we need your images, and we're going to need your mouse dumped in your project folder. And this should be something like mainmenu.png. Sorry, first it gets the renderer. It gets in and it gets, I'm missing something. In state.h, we need to include sdlImage.h. Sorry, I know I was hopping around there for a second, but at the top of our header file, we need sdlImage.h, and then back over in the CPP file, we should have access to this function now. It'd be image load texture, it gets the renderer, and it gets the texture name. I think that's it. Is that how you spell Q? All right. Some things we may want to do when we enter the menu. You may want to center the mouse. Start up the music. Otherwise, I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. In the update, what are some things we want to do here?
Is that for the giving controls?
Yeah, we need some input here. What else? Someone said display earlier. We'll need to do that. Basically, everything we have done in main is going to happen right here in update, but only for the menu. We'll need a poll event loop. That'll be our input. I don't know. This is where we'll get our mouse input. We'll change our buttons around, and we'll display, and we will check for state change. That'll be done with the buttons. All right, all of this happens in a loop, so let's get our loop going. I write it in comments just so I can kind of gather my thoughts, and so I'm not like following a script here. I'm just winging this as if I were doing this for my own personal fun. So a loop. We need a loop. I'm going to put a 1 in there for now. We may come back and add a bool. But this stuff is going to happen over and over again. So this will be our main loop. We've got an event. So while SDL underscore poll event, we're going to pass in our event. The address of our event. And here we can do the switch for event.type. And if we get the quit event, we'll kill the program. So if case SDL underscore quit, we can't really kill the program from here without making a whole lot of changes, but I'm going to do that. You could do that, or you could do exit 0. Exit 0. Maybe that will work. clear the screen. Let's put our background in here. What's different about this and the other things we have drawn? What do we normally have when we call this function? Rectangle. You can use a rectangle here if you want to, but if you don't, it's just going to take the entire image and stretch it across the entire screen, and that's probably fine for a background. And then we present. And then we loop. So display is done. We don't really have any input yet. We'll need the mouse for that, and we don't have any state changes yet. But that will be tied to the buttons. But there's our layout. Let's see if the background image loads. Where did we set that? Here. So you should have main menu PNG in your folder. Or whatever you called yours. Now, if you called yours something different, you have to change that. So now, in order to test this thing out, we need to go over to main and create a menu. So to do that, I'll need to include, I don't need SDL or IOStream anymore. I'm going to include state, and that's going to bring in IOStream and SDL, so that should be fine. And then I can create oh, is it not going to let me do this? Well, let's make them static. Make these all static. Oh, these need to be public. It's a bad thing about copy and paste. If you make a mistake, it just echoes. Okay, those are all public. Update requires a float, so we'll just put in a 0.001 there for now. And yeah, I got to initialize my static variables. So over in state.cpp, we'll put in our state pointers. And that should get your background image up. And it should close out when you click the X. Really, I should have wrote a function in state that did this. That would be a little bit cleaner, but that's okay. Yes, sir. If it's an entry point, you need to right click on the project, go to properties, go to system, and set your subsystem to console. Here we go. Well, let's make a class for each one of those.
Still recording?
I am. So I go to add class. I'm going to type mouse. Mouse is not derived from anything, at least for now. So it's kind of, it'll be its own standalone guy. We're going to need a few things for the mouse though. A texture would be good, but we're going to include SDL and SDL image. We're going to need, let's see, we will need a rectangle for this. We'll need a texture. Let's just, when you're doing something like this, you want to think, what do I need to make this thing work? We all know what a mouse is. We're going to need texture. We'll need a rectangle. Probably need an update function. You may have other variables depending on what you're doing, like how you implement your mouse. You may need some other things. You may want speed, acceleration, or trails, or things like that, animations. But if we're going to piggyback off of the Microsoft mouse, or I should say the OS mouse, we'll just start with that. So let's move over to our source file, and the constructor will load it up. Texture equals image load. And our file name. Now, this annoying renderer wants to be here, so we're going to have to pass that in. And that means I have to modify my header file to accept a renderer. Renderer pointer, I should say. My update function is going to need that as well. And I'll probably want to draw this. And the draw function will definitely need the renderer. Okay, you can cheat and click on the light bulb and get these functions written out for you. Here's our update, here's our draw. Our draw is going to be pretty simple. That'll just be a render copy with our renderer, our texture, our rectangle. No, we have a null and then our rectangle. Rectangle goes in by reference. By reference. And then update. So we need some way of updating our rectangle, because the rectangle is where the mouse is drawn. So in here we need to check for clicks. And we need to update mouse position. Maybe not in that order. Probably should be the other order, right? Okay, let's update the mouse position. We can use the variables. Our rectangle has an X and a Y built into it. Now you could make separate floats for the position of the mouse, or you could use a vector. And we may need to do that, but I think we can get away with just using the two floats that are inside, or the two integers that are inside the rectangle. So, let's see, we've got SDL get mouse get mouse state. What's that going to do? Okay, so this is going to return something about the buttons, and it's going to set the X and the Y. So we can probably use this. It's asking for a pointer, so we pass by reference, we pass the address, X and Y. I want to see if it will move around the screen before I get too carried away with this. I want to at least get it moving, and then we'll worry about clicks. But all right, so we'll go back to state. We'll go down to menu update, and here we've got a comment for update mouse. So wait a minute, I got to create a mouse. Where would I create the mouse? Not this main. Like, this is pretty much it for main. Could we do it in the constructor? We don't want to do it in update, because that would make a new mouse every time.
Enter. Because you don't need it at the beginning of the menu.
Will we create it there? In theory, you could. You could create it here and destroy it on exit.
Because you're not going to need it in on every page, will we? When we're
You wouldn't want it in the game.
in the game, so.
But this is the menu state, so this is not the rest of the game. We could create it in the constructor, or you could create it in enter. I think I want to go with constructor because I think it would be slightly more efficient. Not that it matters at all, but we are going to need a mouse. So over here, back on the header file in our menu class, let's add a mouse. To do that, I'm going to need to include mouse. And then over here on the source side, why is this angry? Oh, no default constructor exists for mouse. So when I do this, I have to pass it to renderer. I said we would do that. Right? That's what I... Okay, so we're just going to put the pointer here. And then over here in the source file, we'll set our mouse equal to a new mouse. Then we can send it to renderer because it's been initialized. I think that's why it was upset. Now, if we create this in the constructor, we have to destroy it in the destructor. So, over here where we defined our destructor in the header file, delete that mouse. Now, we'll probably never create this menu more than once in the entire game, so this is not overly important, but it's a good practice. If you use new, you need to think about using delete. All right, now down here in update, we can call mouse update. And then after we clear, where do we draw the mouse? After clear, and then we'll draw the background on top of it? After the background. And that also needs the renderer. All right, let's run it and see what happens. Well, that's not working. Oh, I forgot something important. Who knows what I did wrong?
You have a cursor.
Do we not have an actual image for the cursor?
I have the image. I forgot something else. Almost, very close. I didn't set the height and the width. So we can do this. You can set it 50 by 50, or you can do the query texture thing. Now, I may have other problems, but this definitely needed to be done. So let's see if that changes anything. Okay, that's cool. But I have two mice, or two cursors, and that's not cool. So, when I create this mouse with this constructor, I'm going to turn off the Windows mouse, and you can do that with SDL show cursor, and you pass it false. No, sorry, it doesn't take a bool, it takes an integer. It says 1 to show the cursor, 0 to hide it, -1 to query the current state. But if we set it to 0, that will turn it off, and then we should only see our PNG while we are focused on our window there. Was anyone successful? I see some of y'all. This is really good. All right, that works. Let's move on to buttons. We don't have much time. Another class. Add class button. We're getting more familiar with classes now. Anytime you're coding or programming, you think of an object, you want to make a class for that object. It makes it a whole lot easier to organize and program and modify later on. So get comfortable with classes. I know I need buttons, so button is an object. What do we need for a button? We need an image. All right, that means I need to include SDL. Need a texture. Need a rectangle. Okay, we're going to need two rectangles because we are using a sprite sheet. Up until now, every image we've brought in, we've just used the entire image, right? But our buttons, assuming you have done the lab correctly. Where are my buttons? Here we go. The buttons are on a sprite sheet. And you've probably seen a sprite sheet before, but we're going to take a piece of this image instead of the whole thing. All right, I need a piece for start, and I need a piece for the selected version of that. You get the idea here. We're only using part of the image. So we're going to have two rectangles. We're going to have the standard rectangle that draws this thing. That's the one we've always used. And then we're going to have another rectangle, and this other rectangle is going to select what we want to draw. So it's also going to have a height and a width, and it's also going to have a position. Remember, your position is at your top left. So if I'm wanting to select start here, what's my position? 0, 0. What if I want to do the highlighted version? 0, 0. Yeah. Yeah, width of the first button, comma 0. But remember, your X and Y coordinates are going to be the top left corner. The height and width will be the same on this sprite sheet, but you could, in theory, move that around too if your sprites are different sizes. So, we're going to have two rectangles. One is called the source rectangle, and the other is called the destination rectangle. Now, buttons are either selected or they aren't. You may want a sound here, you know, if a button is selected or if a button is clicked. If we have time, we'll come back. I'll show you how to do those at some point. It's not overly difficult. What else for a button? Animation. Maybe. Okay. A good button, yeah, it would probably move around. Or shake. Some of them bounce, things like that. Functions. What do we need for functions? Update or action or I like update. And a draw. Definitely need to draw. This constructor is going to need the renderer just like the mouse did. So we can load in our sprite sheet. All right, think about this. How many buttons are we going to create? What? What game are you playing? This ain't Minesweeper.
We have 12 buttons, but we're
I think 5. 6? Okay, 6. We're going to have 6 because we got one for quit. We don't need to load this texture in 6 times. So if you wanted to, you could make this static, and it makes your game run faster, load faster, and use less memory. And we just have to do that thing where we set it up correctly. So let's make the texture static. We'll step over here into global space, and we'll say SDL texture pointer button texture equals 0. I wonder if we can load it right here. This is not modular at all. If we wanted to use this for other buttons that are not on this sprite sheet, this would not work. I don't have a renderer. I can't do that. Never mind. We'll set it to 0. And modify our constructor here. It gets a renderer. And then inside the constructor, we can actually load it. img underscore load texture. The renderer, I think I called mine buttons.png. You named yours something else. If you named it button, don't put the S on there. Make sure yours matches your file. Oh yeah, we got to set our texture equal to that. And then let's set up our rectangles. You know, the height and width is going to be the same for both rectangles across all of the buttons, but the X and Y, how do you want to handle that? It's going to be different for every button. What are the options? What could we do?
Straighten your line or up and down.
Okay, but how do we code this? I know my start button is going to start at 0, 0. I know the next one down is going to start at 0, 64 or whatever it is. All of these coordinates are going to be different for every single button, so there's no way to really streamline this. How do I deal with it? Do I do it in the constructor? Do I do it after I create the button? Not necessarily a right or wrong here. It's just something you have to think about as a programmer. You're at a crossroads. How do you handle this?
Could you put it in a linked list?
Oh my gosh, no. You could.
Well, I'm just asking, I mean, then all you could do is just pull it from memory and keep the button in there.
You could put them in a linked list. I don't think that would handle the position. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't overcomplicate it. I mean, you could put all your buttons in a linked list, though. We might do that. We might do a vector, though. We might do something else. Here's what we can do. We can either pass it in modify our constructor a little bit. Now, when we create a button, we have to specify where that button starts. So if I'm making start, I'm going to pass in 0, 0. If I'm making whatever the next one is on my list, I'm going to pass in 0, 64, 0, 128, and so on. So you can do it this way, but you have to know that when you create the button. The other option, you could make a function here for set X and Y. And you pass them in there, and you have to call this function every time you create a button. Or since everything's public, I could set X and Y after I make the button. So state over here in menu. Let's say I made a button called start. It's not going to like that. Start. And then in my constructor, I could say, button equals new button, and I pass it to renderer, and then I could say button, what was it, s rect dot x equals something. 0. So we could do it that way. I think that's messy, but it's not wrong. You could do it this way. Somehow we have to set that rectangle. No one's giving me any ideas. We're going to go through the constructor. All right, here we go. We're doing it this way. We're just going to have to pass it in when we create it. Yeah, float X, float Y. All right, given that information, now we can say our source rectangle dot x equals x, y equals y, I don't remember the dimensions. Does anybody?
$184.
182? No, what's 384 divided by 2? 107.
192.
Was the 64 right? Or did I just guess that? I may be wrong. 384 divided by 64. 64 in decimal. If you're really lazy, you can write it right there. You can just say, 384 divided by 6. It's in the constructor, right? It's fine. So that sets up our source rectangle, and we can set up our destination rectangle. I don't know where this thing goes. I don't know, we'll figure that out later. That one we may have to set with a function or set manually inside of main. We can set the height and width though. It's going to be the exact same, so you can set them both. What did I do? There. We've already set the selected bool to false. And let's go ahead and make that function that sets the position for the button. Set position. Forgot my scope. And I forgot my X and Y over in the header file. So for here we'll pass in a float, 2 floats. You can write X and Y here if you want to, but you don't have to. We've got about 3 minutes and we're going to wrap this up. That gets our sprite sheet in. Let's do our draw function now. That's pretty simple. This will be a straight render copy function. We don't need the EX stuff. We need the renderer, our texture, our source rectangle. This will be the first time we haven't written null here, but our source rectangle by reference, and our destination rectangle. So with that done, let's go back and fix our state here. To bring in a button, we'll have to include that up at the top. Button.h. I call this start. I'm going to call it start button just to be a little more specific. Button, start button. I'm in the wrong place. State CPP. So start button equals new button. We can pass it to the renderer, but we also pass it where we're drawing from. We already said that would be 0, 0. And then we need to set the destination for this button. Where on the screen do you think we should draw this?
Center.
Okay, center. So start button, set position. Our screen width is what, 1280? Divided by 2, and then we subtract the half width of the button. So we're, what we say, 192? 192 divided by 2, that would be the half width. Are y'all following me here? I took half the screen and I set my button there, and then I scooted over the half width so it will be centered. And then Y, how far down?
172 divided by 2.
What?
172 divided by 2.
Why are you doing math on this?
You did math with that?
You're making it weird. Just do 300. Update buttons. So we don't have an update in there yet, but we can draw this thing. Where do you want to draw it?
After the mouse.
After the mouse? You want your mouse to hide behind your buttons? I would put it in front of the mouse. I would draw the mouse very last because the mouse is always on top. But let's just see if it works. There we go. And the mouse is hiding behind it just like Don wanted. I don't think that was a good idea. I'm going to draw my mouse after I draw the button. And here's something you can do. I'm going to try this. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to run the program in debug mode. I'm going to minimize my console so I just see my graphics window here. And let's say I don't like the position. Now we got it centered on the X. The math was good. But the Y, I don't know. Maybe I need to move it up, or maybe I need to move it down, whatever. 300 is not working for me. Now you could just close this out and change your code and guess at something and come back in and look at it. Or, let's scoot this over. We can put in a breakpoint where the mouse, where the button draw, start button draw. Put a breakpoint there. And it's going to pause. And then we can tap into this thing, start button, direct, and there's the Y at 300. And we can edit this, edit value. So maybe 200 is better. So I just changed that. I just changed the code while the program is running. I'm going to remove my breakpoint and hit continue. And look at that. In case you can't tell, it moved up. That's it's not overly cool in a little program like this, but in a program where you're having to wait on a lot of build time or a lot of loading time, it's a nice feature to be able to go into the debugger, change a value around, play with it, get it where you want it, and not have to rebuild it over and over again. The other thing you can do is set up input keys, so you could actually move it around and then have it display its coordinates in the console, and you'll be like, yeah, that's where I want it, and then you go back and hard code that number in. So that's a neat trick to log away in the back of your mind. That's all we're going to do today.